Well, when you're fishing lots of different venues, it's quite important to think about the type of landing net that you're using. I've been in scenarios in the past where I've ended up on some fish and I've had a period of catching fish, and obviously you want to make the most of those scenarios. Sometimes you're catching fish and anything that's part of your setup that's going to slow you down from making the most from that opportunity is obviously going to have an impact on your weight at the end of the day. For that reason, I carry a selection of landing nets. I just carry them in my van, and there are 4 here in this range that cover slightly different scenarios depending on the type of fishing that I'm doing and the venue that I'm fishing. We've got the fine mesh net, really light. The frames on these nets are super light. It's amazing how light they actually are. But this is the fine one, and as the name suggests, it's a really fine mesh. Now that is perfect for when you're fishing on commercials and you're fishing with hair rigs, which are bayonets, or some form of a bait spike, because the fine mesh stops those you know, part of the hair rig, like either the bayonet or the spike, going through the mesh. And I'm sure you've all had it when you've got certainly when you're catching carp, they're crashing around in the net. It's easy for them to rip that hair out, and it means you've got to put another hook length on. And obviously when you're catching fish, you don't want anything like that to slow you down. So that's a superb net if you're going to be fishing that way. The next one we've got is the super light. As the name suggests, it's really surprising how light that is. That's beautiful. But it's also, this is a net it's really good if you're using barbed hooks. Obviously a lot of the venues we fish now, certainly the natural ones, you can use barbed hooks. And again, this material, it just means that your barb is not going to get caught in the actual mesh itself, which again will slow you down if you are actually catching fish, and it just causes problems. And ultimately, which a lot of people overlook, it actually, every time that happens, it actually damages the barb on your hook as well. So you don't want anything like that. So that's why I carry that particular net. The other net which I use a lot on the commercials is the carp net. Now, as you can see, by its very nature, it is larger in size, because I use this on venues where you might be catching, you know, a lot of the venues we fish now hold double figure carp, and they are potential match winning fish. And so you want a net that's going to allow you to net those fish, not just net them, but you want to be able to net them easy. You know, sometimes when a great big fish like that comes up in front of you, it's great to scoop it first time, and that's why a bigger net is obviously more important. The beauty with this net is it's a combination of mesh on this particular design. So you've got the larger mesh there, which means when you put it through the water to net the fish, that allows you to do that nice and easily, because there's obviously less drag. But then in the central part of it, the bottom of the net, is the finer mesh again. So that's really good for if you're using bands or bait bands, because they're not going to get caught in there. So this net is a combination. It's an ideal net if you're fishing on commercial waters where you are likely to encounter larger carp. And the final net is the rubber net. As the name suggests, the material is rubber. It's incredibly super quick drying, which I know is an issue for a lot of people. You literally just one shake of it at the end of your session or during the session and the net is dry, all the water's off it, so it dries virtually instantly. And obviously, because of the nature of the rubber, it can be it's very friendly for if you're using barbed hooks, again, because it's not that the material that's going to allow a barbed hook to get caught in it. That obviously makes it very good if you're fishing a venue that's got, you know, where you're allowed to use barbed hooks. So they're the 4 nets that I carry with me, and they really will cover every venue or every eventuality I'm going to come across. So just by being prepared like that, it just means that when you are faced with one of the rare opportunities of being drawn on plenty of fish and you're catching plenty of fish, it just allows you to make the most of that opportunity. And just a final note about nets, I'm sure you're all aware of this, but it is something that we all need to pay attention to, is when you get home, just put your nets out to dry. Obviously when you get to the bank, get your nets out, let them dry out before you put them in the water. It's our responsibility to, you know, do our very best to stop the spread of disease, and, you know, it is for the greater good and it's for everyone's benefit. So when you get home, just if you can, get the nets out in your garden, make sure they're nice and dry, and your stink bag. Don't forget, these nets go in a stink bag, so disease can be spread with the stink bag as well. So just make sure they're nice and dry before your next session, so you know whatever venue you're going to, you're not going to be spreading any disease.